Ethan Carter, a proud, decorated military veteran turned city official, has always found solace in his sprawling, sun-dappled ranch on the outskirts of town. After years of service, he built his property as a peaceful retreat, a place where vintage car projects, quiet evenings on the porch, and personal freedom reign supreme. His ranch isn't just a home. It's a testament to the independence he fought for all his life. Every detail of the property reflects Ethan's values. Rugged charm mixed with modern comforts, expansive fields dotted with wildflowers, and a porch that lights up his nights in a way that brings back memories of simpler times. However, this haven is about to collide with a force he never anticipated: a domineering homeowners association, HOA. Enter Kerren, self-appointed HOA president and the personification of entitlement. With her impeccably ironed skirts, a clipboard always in hand, and an air of superiority, Kerren has built her reputation on micromanaging every facet of neighborhood aesthetics and behavior. To her, rules are sacred, and any deviation is a personal affront. When Ethan's porch lights, intended to create a welcoming glow, are branded too bright and a violation of community aesthetics, Kerren is quick to pounce. Their first encounter is charged. At sunrise, as Ethan steps out to admire the morning mist on his property, he finds a crisp, official-looking final warning taped to his door. Kerren appears at the threshold, her tone a mix of smug authority and thinly veiled menace. "The rules apply to everyone, Mr. Carter," she intones. For Ethan, who's never subscribed to these arbitrary HOA edicts, the warning feels like a declaration of war, a challenge to his long-held right to live freely on his own land. Ethan's initial reaction is one of disbelief and irritation. In his mind, the light on his porch isn't a disturbance. It's an emblem of his hard-won independence. Yet Kerren's tone leaves no room for negotiation. What began as a misunderstanding quickly becomes an unmistakable conflict: the battle for property rights against an overreaching bureaucracy. Ethan contemplates his options as he reads the document, a litany of unfair fines and an array of rules he never agreed to. The injustice stings, especially when he recalls how the HOA's bylaws were imposed without the input of homeowners. With a determined spark in his eyes, he resolves that this is not a minor issue to be swept under the rug. Kerren, meanwhile, stands firm in her belief that the HOA's authority is absolute. In that moment, the first battle lines are drawn: Ethan's right to personal liberty versus Kerren's rigid adherence to rules. The confrontation sets the stage for what will evolve into a full-blown clash between a man who values personal freedom and an institution hell-bent on control. As the morning sun rises higher, so does Ethan's resolve to push back against this unwarranted intrusion into his life, a decision that will change the neighborhood dynamics forever. The next day brings a rude awakening. Ethan opens his mailbox to discover an official envelope containing a $750 fine, an administrative fee for allegedly violating the HOA's community light regulations. Kerren, ever the vigilant enforcer, is already out on the street, arms crossed and a look of self-satisfied authority plastered across her face. "It's simple," she declares to a small gathering of neighbors. "If you can't comply with our guidelines, you simply can't live here." Unwilling to be cowed, Ethan reviews the document. His background as a city official makes him no stranger to bureaucratic overreach. With quiet defiance, he cites local zoning laws and property rights that clearly exempt him from such arbitrary dictates. "I've followed every legal channel, Kerren," he says calmly, as the crowd watches the exchange with mixed expressions of sympathy and curiosity. But Kerren isn't prepared to take no for an answer. Within hours, inspectors start knocking on doors, and anonymous complaints mysteriously appear in the HOA office. Complaints aimed squarely at Ethan's property. Kerren orchestrates the visit like a seasoned puppeteer, confident that a show of power will force him into submission. She even goes as far as calling in local authorities, suggesting that the issue might escalate into something more serious. Ethan's frustration mounts as the day unfolds into a relentless barrage of official warnings and legal threats. Every time he tries to reason with Kerren or refer her to local ordinances, she counters with a bureaucratic smile, reinforcing the idea that the HOA's rules are the law of the land. The tension in the neighborhood begins to rise as more homeowners start whispering about the tyranny of the board and Kerren's unyielding approach. In a private moment that evening, while poring over community guidelines and local ordinances in his study, Ethan realizes that this isn't just about a fine or a minor infraction. It's about a systemic abuse of power. Determined to protect not only his property, but also the rights of his neighbors, he begins to formulate a strategy. The fine becomes a spark for what could turn into a broader investigation into the HOA's questionable practices. The scene is set for a battle of wills. Kerren's smug entitlement versus Ethan's steadfast commitment to fairness and legal rights. As the chapter closes, Ethan stands firm on his ranch, a lone beacon of resistance against an organization that claims to represent the community, while really serving its own narrow interests. As days turn into weeks, the pressure on Ethan intensifies. Kerren, now emboldened by her early successes, embarks on a series of aggressive maneuvers. Suddenly, a slew of false violations begin appearing on his property. Notes warning him of impending eviction, letters suggesting that his land is subject to seizure, and even threats that hint at the HOA's willingness to take extreme legal action. The once quiet hum of the neighborhood now buzzes with whispers of HOA corruption. Some homeowners start confiding in Ethan, sharing their own stories of being bullied or coerced into making donations to the HOA's mysterious funds. In hushed tones, they speak of fines that vanish into a black hole and meetings where decisions are made behind closed doors. One evening, a trusted board member, nervously glancing over her shoulder, approaches Ethan with a tip. "I can't stay silent anymore," she confesses in a trembling voice. Kerren's been funneling HOA money into her own personal accounts. The violations are just a way to scare us and cover her tracks. This revelation confirms Ethan's worst suspicions about systemic corruption within the association. Determined to build his case, Ethan begins a covert investigation. He installs discreet cameras around his property and gathers records from local government offices. Every misstep, every out-of-place fine is documented meticulously. With every piece of evidence, he becomes more convinced that the HOA is less about community care and more about extorting money and exerting control over its residents. Meanwhile, Kerren's tactics grow even more brazen. She starts targeting not just Ethan, but anyone who dares to question the status quo. False complaints multiply, and pressure mounts on board members who begin to doubt her decisions. A rift forms within the HOA as a few members express concern over the legality of her actions, while others cling to her authority out of fear or ingrained loyalty. Despite the mounting intimidation, Ethan remains resolute. His days are spent poring over legal documents, and his nights watching grainy footage from his security cameras. He knows that if he can expose the corruption, it will not only vindicate his position, but also liberate his neighbors from the tyranny of an overreaching board. In the background, the community's tension builds toward a tipping point. The homeowners, once divided by fear and apathy, begin to share stories and pool evidence. The seeds of a revolt have been sown, and Ethan's investigation serves as the catalyst for a broader uprising against the HOA's unlawful practices. By the end of this segment, the conflict has transformed from a personal dispute into a community-wide battle. Ethan's determination to uncover the truth challenges not only Kerren's authority, but also the very foundation upon which the HOA's power was built. One fateful morning, Ethan awakens to chaos. His driveway is partially excavated, and heavy machinery is parked in his yard. Kerren's latest excuse? The HOA is expanding sidewalks to improve community safety, a claim that makes little sense on a sprawling ranch. The act isn't just intrusive, it's illegal, and it crosses every acceptable boundary. Ethan wastes no time. Clad in his city official badge and armed with legal documents, he marches to the next HOA meeting. In the packed community hall, tension hangs heavy. When Ethan steps up, file in hand, silence falls over the room. One by one, he presents damning evidence. Invoices for unauthorized work, irregularities in HOA financial records, and witness accounts of Kerren's bullying tactics. The room erupts with murmurs and gasps. Some board members shift uncomfortably, while a few homeowners nod in affirmation. It's the first public challenge to Kerren's reign. "We deserve transparency, not tyranny," Ethan declares, his voice resolute as he projects the evidence onto a makeshift screen. The message is clear. The HOA has no right to trample on personal property or abuse its power. In the aftermath, community sentiment begins to shift. Neighbors who once feared reprisal now voice support for Ethan's stand. They recall similar overreaches in their own homes, a tossed notice here, a baseless fine there. And slowly, their shared indignation cements into unity. Kerren, witnessing the tide turn, grows frantic. Yet even as board members begin to question her authority, she clings to control, determined to prove that the rules are absolute. The HOA's extreme actions, illegal towing of vehicles, abrupt utility shutdowns, and even bogus lawsuits, only serve to strengthen Ethan's resolve. With each violation, he gathers more proof of systemic corruption. His counterattack is methodical. He submits detailed complaints to local authorities, calls for independent audits of the HOA's finances, and works behind the scenes to rally other homeowners. The confrontation at the next HOA meeting becomes a defining moment. Ethan, now backed by a growing contingent of dissenting voices, confronts Kerren publicly. "Your time is up," he tells her, his words echoing off the walls. "We won't be bullied into submission any longer." The exchange is fiery, charged with years of pent-up frustration and the promise of accountability. Kerren's face reddens with indignation as she fires back with empty legal jargon and personal insults. But her arguments crumble in the face of undeniable evidence and the united front of the community. It's a battle not just for property rights, but for dignity and fairness. The more Kerren struggles to maintain control, the clearer it becomes that the HOA's foundation is built on fear, and that fear is rapidly being replaced by collective determination. As the meeting concludes, many homeowners leave with renewed hope. The seeds of change have been planted, and for the first time in years, the community dares to imagine life free from the shackles of arbitrary rule. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, Kerren escalates her tactics. One balmy afternoon, she contacts the local police, falsely claiming that Ethan's extra-strong porch lights are creating a public disturbance that endangers neighborhood children. When officers arrive, Ethan calmly presents his credentials. The police, unimpressed by Kerren's flimsy allegations, quickly dismiss the call, only adding to her mounting frustration. Not to be outdone, Kerren then hires a private investigator to dig up dirt on Ethan, a desperate bid to undermine his credibility. However, fate has a way of catching those who overstep the law. Late one night, while Ethan reviews footage from one of his newly installed security cameras, he catches the PI creeping around his garage. With meticulous precision, Ethan saves the clip, a silent testament to Kerren's continued willingness to break the law. At the next HOA meeting, the tension is palpable. Ethan, confident and resolute, plays the incriminating footage for the assembled homeowners. Gasps ripple through the room as Kerren's unauthorized actions are laid bare on the screen. For the first time, even those who had once supported her begin to question her authority. "This isn't just about lights or rules," Ethan proclaims. "It's about integrity, and you've lost it." Kerren's eyes dart nervously as whispers fill the hall. No longer can she hide behind legal threats and bureaucratic jargon. With her final desperate gambit exposed, the community's trust in her evaporates. As Ethan methodically outlines each violation and misdeed, it becomes painfully clear that Kerren's crusade for control was fueled by personal greed and a blatant disregard for the law. In that charged moment, the balance of power tips irrevocably. Homeowners, emboldened by Ethan's unwavering stand, begin to rally, demanding accountability not only for the fines and threats, but for the overall corruption that has long plagued the HOA. Kerren, cornered and exposed, can only watch as her carefully constructed facade crumbles before her eyes. The meeting ends with a collective declaration. They will no longer tolerate abuse of power. Kerren's final, desperate moves have backfired spectacularly, setting in motion the events that will lead to her downfall. The fallout is swift and decisive. In the weeks following Kerren's public exposure, a wave of rebellion sweeps through the community. Homeowners unite in a historic vote that ousts Kerren from the HOA board. In a dramatic turn of events, local authorities launch an investigation into the HOA's finances and operations, uncovering layers of fraud and mismanagement that had been hidden for years. Kerren's once impregnable position is now untenable. Facing relentless legal scrutiny and a barrage of class action lawsuits orchestrated by Ethan and his allies, she finds herself isolated. The community's newfound unity forces the board to reconsider every decision made under her watch. Meetings that were once hushed and secretive now transform into forums of transparency and accountability. Meanwhile, the very institution that Kerren had so zealously defended begins to unravel. Fines levied for baseless infractions are rescinded, and a formal audit reveals that HOA funds have been misappropriated for personal gain. The public humiliation is complete. Kerren's name becomes synonymous with tyranny and greed. In one final act of poetic justice, her stately home is swiftly put on the market, a symbol of the crumbling regime she once led. As the dust settles, Ethan finds himself at the center of a community rebirth. Neighbors who had once cowered now stand tall, emboldened by the victory over a system that had long oppressed them. With Kerren out of the picture, the HOA is forced to rebuild from the ground up, this time with transparency, accountability, and the voices of homeowners guiding every decision. Ethan, though modest about his role, savors a quiet victory each morning as he sips his coffee on that now well-lit porch. His battle was never about the brightness of his lights, but about reclaiming the right to live freely, without undue interference. The crumbling of the HOA isn't just a win for him. It's a triumph for every resident who dared to stand up for what's right. In the aftermath of Kerren's dramatic downfall, the long-hidden abuses of the HOA finally come to light, and so does the full weight of the law. As whistleblowers and detailed records emerge, state regulators launch a sweeping investigation into the association's finances. The probe quickly uncovers a labyrinth of illegal fines, unauthorized fees, and misappropriated funds that have been funneled into personal accounts for far too long. A comprehensive audit report, now in the public domain, lays bare the extent of the corruption. It reveals that what were once routine fines were nothing more than a cover for systematic financial abuse. Every dollar misdirected, every baseless fee levied, stands as a stark testament to the unchecked power wielded by the HOA's leadership. This report not only indicts Kerren and her inner circle, but also exposes systemic failures that allowed such practices to thrive. Galvanized by the undeniable evidence, a coalition of outraged homeowners, led by Ethan, files a class action lawsuit against the HOA. This legal battle quickly transforms into a landmark case, signaling that no community organization is above the law. The lawsuit isn't merely about recovering lost funds. It's a direct confrontation against an institution that has long prioritized its own interests over those of its members. At a critical public hearing, Ethan steps forward as the voice of a silenced community. Calm yet resolute, he presents a meticulously documented account of the HOA's abuses. Supported by the audit report, video evidence, and the heartfelt testimonies of his neighbors, his testimony cuts through the noise and leaves little room for denial. His words detail not just the financial misdeeds, but also the broader erosion of trust and community spirit that has plagued the neighborhood for years. One by one, the board members, who once operated with impunity, are forced to face the consequences of their actions. Several resign in disgrace as the mounting evidence becomes impossible to ignore. Others find themselves embroiled in separate legal proceedings as state authorities move decisively to hold every wrongdoer accountable. The judiciary's firm stance sends a resounding message: abuse of power, regardless of its guise, will be met with uncompromising justice. Media coverage of the proceedings amplifies the community's fight for accountability, turning what began as a local dispute into a beacon of hope for homeowners everywhere. Legal experts laud the thoroughness of the investigation and the courage shown by residents who risked everything to stand up against corruption. The case sets a new precedent, one that promises to recalibrate the balance of power in community governance, not only in this town, but across the state. As the legal battle reaches its climax, the consequences for the HOA become inescapable. With its assets frozen and its operations rendered null, the once formidable association is effectively dissolved. The organization that once imposed arbitrary rules and extorted money now stands as a stark reminder of the price of unchecked authority. In the end, Ethan's steadfast leadership and the community's collective resolve transform a personal vendetta into a historic victory against corruption. This decisive chapter not only secures justice for every homeowner wronged by the HOA's abuses, it heralds a new era where transparency, fairness, and the rule of law are the cornerstones of community life. As the once mighty HOA crumbles into oblivion, so too does Kerren's carefully constructed persona. No longer the iron-fisted enforcer of community decorum, she finds herself facing a cascade of personal disasters that leave her exposed and humiliated. Once the poster child of authority and control, Kerren now becomes a living cautionary tale about the corrupting nature of unchecked power. It starts with a series of events that unravel her professional and personal life almost simultaneously. News spreads quickly among the residents. Her prize car, a symbol of her status and success, is repossessed after mounting debts come to light. The repossession isn't just a financial blow. It's a public spectacle that tarnishes the image she worked so hard to cultivate. In the same breath, a messy and very public divorce ensues, laying bare intimate details that she would have preferred to keep hidden. Friends, neighbors, and even distant acquaintances are left reeling from the shock, as the fall of the once dominant HOA president becomes the talk of the town. In a further twist of fate, Kerren's professional standing takes a nosedive. Once revered for her unyielding enforcement of the HOA's rules, she now finds herself demoted at work, a demotion that is as humiliating as it is inevitable. The very qualities she once paraded as strengths become liabilities. Her colleagues whisper about her inability to handle the consequences of her overreach, and even her most loyal supporters begin to distance themselves as her credibility vanishes. The irony is not lost on the community. Rumors begin to circulate that Kerren, with all her former bluster and authority, might soon find herself employed in a role far removed from her previous high-handed position, perhaps even as an assistant property manager in another HOA. The very system she once exploited for her personal gain now appears poised to repurpose her skills in a humbling, subordinate role. At a local community event that marks the final chapter of her reign, fate delivers the ultimate blow. Amid the murmur of subdued laughter and knowing glances, Ethan spots her, diminished and disheartened, attempting to blend into the crowd. Their eyes meet briefly, and in that moment, the irony of the situation is palpable. With a wry smile that carries the weight of hard-won justice, Ethan leans over and quips, "I hope you enjoy following the rules now." His words, simple yet piercing, encapsulate the poetic justice that has been the rallying cry of the community's uprising. In that instant, Kerren's fall from grace is complete. The image of the domineering, inflexible enforcer is replaced by that of a cautionary figure, a symbol of how the pursuit of power at the expense of others can lead to personal ruin. The neighborhood, once choked by her oppressive shadow, now basks in a newfound sense of freedom and relief. No longer must they live under the threat of arbitrary fines or invasive overreach. They have reclaimed not just their rights, but their dignity. Kerren's personal downfall serves as a stark reminder to all: unchecked power, when wielded without accountability, is destined to collapse. The very structure she helped build, one of fear, control, and silent obedience, now lies in ruins, leaving behind lessons of resilience and the enduring strength of a community united. In the wake of the upheaval, the neighborhood has transformed into a model of unity and renewal. The stifling regulations and constant fear that once permeated every corner of the community are replaced by an atmosphere of openness and mutual respect. Homeowners now share more than just adjacent properties. They share a common story of resilience and victory over oppression. On a warm evening, as the sky softens into shades of rose and amber, Ethan settles into his favorite rocking chair on the porch. The air hums with the gentle buzz of friendly chatter from neighbors gathering on lawns and in front yards, celebrating the newfound freedom. Amid the laughter and light-hearted banter, a close friend approaches Ethan, holding up a handmade violation notice that jests about his excessive pride in community spirit. The playful ribbing brings a round of chuckles, serving as a sweet reminder of the journey they have all endured. As he sips his coffee, Ethan reflects on the dramatic series of events that once threatened to strip him of his sanctuary. His ranch now stands as more than a home. It's a symbol of collective empowerment and defiance against unjust authority. The bitter legacy of Kerren's iron-fisted rule has been replaced by a spirit of collaboration, where every resident's voice matters and every shared success is celebrated. Throughout the neighborhood, old wounds are healing and a vibrant sense of possibility takes root. The days of secretive meetings and fearful glances are long gone, replaced by open forums, community picnics, and honest discussions about building a better future. The transformation is not just physical, but deeply emotional, a reaffirmation of the power inherent in standing together against tyranny. In this transformed landscape, the final mic drop is both subtle and profound. There are no grand speeches or dramatic declarations. Instead, the victory is found in the everyday moments, a shared smile, a supportive nod, the simple act of living freely without fear of arbitrary control. It's in these quiet, enduring gestures that justice and empowerment reveal themselves. As dusk deepens into night, the community's lights twinkle softly in the darkness, a gentle nod to the resilience that now defines them. Ethan, feeling the weight of his hard-won triumph, knows that the true victory was never just about winning a battle over rules or regulations. It was about reclaiming dignity, restoring trust, and showing that when a community unites to challenge unjust power, even the most entrenched systems can be transformed. The story of the HOA's downfall and Kerren's fall from grace thus concludes not with a bang, but with a lasting echo of collective courage, a reminder that when individuals stand together, justice is not only attainable, but inevitable.